The morning mist was still clinging to the surface of Lake Oconee like a thin, silver shroud when the first scream shattered the silence. It wasn't a scream of pain, but of high-decibel entitlement. I didn't even have to look up from my coffee to know who it was. There was only one person in the Whispering Pines community who could reach that specific frequency before 8:00 a.m. Beatrice Vane, the self-appointed sheriff of the shoreline and president of the Homeowners Association. Arthur Miller, step out here this instant. I sighed, set my mug down on the weathered cedar railing of my deck, and walked to the edge of the lawn. Beatrice was standing on the gravel path that separated our properties, her hands perched on her hips like a raptor's talons. She was dressed in a crisp white linen suit that was entirely too formal for a lakeside Tuesday. Behind her stood a young man in a cheap suit, clutching a clipboard with the nervous energy of someone who had just realized they were on the wrong side of a firing squad. "Good morning, Beatrice," I said, leaning against a post. "You're looking vibrant today. Is there a reason you're waking up the herons?" "Don't you patronize me?" she snapped, gesturing wildly toward the water. "We've had the survey done. The board met last night in an emergency session. Your dock, Arthur, it's an eyesore, a liability, and most importantly, it's an encroachment." I blinked. "An encroachment? It's been there since 1974, Beatrice. My father built that dock with his own two hands. It's grandfathered into every deed in this cul-de-sac." "Not according to the new riparian boundary lines," she smirked, snatching the clipboard from her assistant. "As of 3 weeks ago, the HOA restructured the common area access. Your dock is now sitting on 60% community property. It's an illegal structure. You have 48 hours to begin demolition, or we'll have it condemned and removed at your expense." I felt a cold prickle of anger in my chest. This wasn't just about a dock. Beatrice had been trying to force me out of the neighborhood for 3 years, ever since I refused to vote for her uniform exterior lighting initiative, which was really just a kickback scheme for her nephew's electrical company. I was the last old guard resident left, the guy with the slightly messy garden and the vintage wooden Chris Craft boat that didn't fit her vision of a sterile luxury resort. "Beatrice, you can't just restructure boundary lines without a court order," I said, my voice low and steady. "I can when I own the majority of the board and the management company," she whispered, leaning in so close I could smell her expensive perfume. "You're an anchor dragging down the property values of this entire cove, Arthur. It's time to cut the line. This is an eviction notice for your dock. Be off it by noon, or I'll have the sheriff's department escort your precious boat to the impound lot." She turned on her heel and marched away, her heels clicking rhythmically on the stone path. I sat on the edge of my dock for 30 minutes watching the ripples. The boat Beatrice hated so much, the SS Aliner, bobbed gently in its slip. It was a 1961 mahogany beauty named after my late wife. It was the only thing I had left of our summers together. I looked at the eviction notice she'd left behind. It was official looking, stamped with the HOA seal. But something caught my eye, a small footnote about the common area lease agreement Beatrice had cited. I might be a retired history teacher, but I spent 30 years researching archives. I knew that every piece of land in Whispering Pines had a paper trail that went back to the 1920s. I headed into my study and pulled out a dusty blue ledger, the original records of the Pine Creek Logging Company, which had owned this entire valley before the lake was dammed. My father had been the company lawyer. He'd left me everything, including the original land grants. As I scrolled through the digital archives of the county clerk's office on my laptop, a slow, predatory grin spread across my face. Beatrice had been so focused on restructuring the HOA boundaries that she had forgotten to check the foundational deeds. She thought she was playing checkers. I realized I was holding the board. 1 hour later, at exactly 10:15 a.m., I walked down to the community marina. The marina was Beatrice's pride and joy. It was where she kept her $250,000 Cobalt surfboat, a monstrosity of chrome and neon blue that she used to roar past my house, deliberately kicking up wakes to rock my dock. She called it the Vane Prize. I found the dockmaster, a kid named Toby who I'd taught in 11th grade American history. "Hey, Toby," I said, handing him a thermos of coffee. "Busy morning." "Hey, Mr. Miller, not really, just waiting for Mrs. Vane. She called and said she's taking the prize out for a photo shoot for some real estate magazine." "Change of plans, Toby," I said, pulling a folded piece of paper from my pocket. "I need you to look at this. It's a writ of immediate distraint and a notice of seizure." Toby's eyes went wide. "A what, Mr. Miller? I just pump gas." "Read the highlighted part," I said gently. In 1924, the Pine Creek Logging Company granted a perpetual easement and right-of-way to the families of the original workers. But there was a clause, a reversionary interest. If the land was ever used for commercial purposes without a unanimous vote from the descendants of those workers, the title to the docks and all permanently moored vessels would revert to the senior living descendant of the original grant holder. Beatrice had started charging the neighbors a premium maintenance fee for the marina last month, a commercial transaction, and I was the last descendant of the original grant holder. "Technically, Toby," I said, pointing to the water, "since this marina is operating as a commercial enterprise on my family's ancestral easement without my consent, I am now the legal steward of everything tied to these pilings until a court sorts it out. And according to the Pine Creek Act, I have the right to distrain property to cover unpaid historical dividends." You're taking her boat," Toby whispered, half terrified, half impressed. "I'm seizing it," I corrected, "for safekeeping." At 11:00 a.m., the exact hour Beatrice told me she would have the sheriff at my dock, I was sitting in the captain's chair of the Vane prize. I had used my master key, which worked on most of the marina's older slips, to unhook her lines. I didn't even start her engine. I didn't want to be accused of theft. I used my little electric trolling motor to slowly, silently tow the $250,000 boat out of the marina and around the bend toward my house. I reached my dock just as a white SUV with county sheriff on the side pulled into my driveway. Beatrice was already there, standing on my lawn with her arms crossed, a look of pure, malicious triumph on her face. Beside her stood Deputy Miller, no relation, a man I'd shared many a fishing trip with. "There he is," Beatrice shrieked, pointing at me as I drifted toward the dock. "He's trespassing on community property. Arrest him and get wait, what is that?" Her voice climbed an octave. She squinted as I maneuvered her massive neon blue boat alongside my old wooden dock. "Is that my boat?" she gasped. "You stole my boat, deputy. He's a pirate. He's literally a pirate." I tossed a line to the deputy, who caught it instinctively. I hopped off the Vane prize and onto my illegal dock, holding a stack of legal documents. "I didn't steal it, Beatrice," I said, stepping onto the grass. "I seized it, under the Pine Creek Logging Act of 1924 and the subsequent 1956 deed revision." I handed the papers to the deputy. "Morning, Ben, check page 4. You'll see the sheriff's department has a standing obligation to honor the distraint clause if the HOA enters into commercial fee sharing on private easement land." Deputy Ben rubbed his jaw, looking at the papers. He'd seen Beatrice's antics for years and was clearly enjoying the change of pace. "Arthur, this is pretty dense. You're saying because she charged for the marina, you own the marina?" "Not the land, just the rights to the structures and the contents," I clarified. "Until the HOA pays me the back dividends for the use of my family's water rights, which, at a rough estimate, is about $400,000, I am the legal custodian of the marina's assets, including the Vane prize." Beatrice was turning a shade of purple I'd only ever seen on a ripe eggplant. "That's a lie, it's a trick. My lawyers are going to tell you that you messed up, Beatrice," I interrupted. "You were so busy trying to find a way to take my dock that you forgot you built your entire empire on land my grandfather leased to the town for $1 a year. That lease expired in 2024. I haven't renewed it yet." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the cicadas seemed to stop buzzing. Beatrice looked at her boat, her pride, her status symbol, now tied to the very dock she had come to demolish. She looked at the deputy, who was slowly folding the papers and handing them back to me. "Ma'am," Ben said, "this looks like a civil property dispute involving a historical land grant. I can't touch him and I can't make him give the boat back without a judge's order. But looking at these signatures, I'd say he's got a better claim to this dock than you do to that boat right now." "Get off my property, Arthur," she screamed, though we both knew whose property it really was. "Actually, Beatrice," I said, gesturing to the eviction notice she had pinned to my mailbox earlier, "according to your own logic, this dock is now an official impound lot for seized HOA assets. I think I'll keep the boat here for the next, 48 hours, just to see how the paperwork shakes out." The resolution was swifter than I expected. Beatrice's lawyers called me that afternoon. They were panicked. It turns out that if word got out that the HOA didn't actually own the marina land, the property values of every home in the community would plummet and the HOA would be sued into non-existence by the other residents. I made them an offer. I would sign over the land grant to the community, not the HOA, but a protected land trust, ensuring that no one could ever restructure the boundaries again. In exchange, I wanted a lifetime exemption from all HOA fees, a public apology for the eviction attempt, and for Beatrice Vane to resign her position as president immediately. Oh, and I wanted her to personally pay for the refinishing of the SS Eliner's mahogany hull. The papers were signed by sunset. I sat on my dock that evening, the SS Aliner looking sharper than she had in years and Beatrice's blue monster gone, towed back to her house in a state of deep, humiliated silence. The lake was quiet again, the herons were back. I took a sip of my tea and smiled. Beatrice had tried to evict me from the water, but she forgot that some roots go deeper than a property line. I wasn't just a resident, I was the anchor, and you can't move an anchor just because you don't like where it's dropped.